Well, thank you for joining us today. We're pleased that you're interested in learning more about the NACADA Journal and specifically about the publication process, including submission, review, and of course, support. We have a terrific panel today and each one of them is very anxious to share with you their own experiences in hopes that once we finish, you will find the process less daunting, because it really is, and exciting, because let's face it, getting one's manuscript published really is exciting. Let me introduce our panelists and moderators today, and I will begin with myself. I'm Dr. Susan Campbell. I'm Chief Student Affairs Officer Emerita at the University of Southern Maine, and I am one of the co-editors of the NACADA Journal. We have Dr. Lisa Rubin, Associate Professor at Kansas State University. She's also co-editor of the NACADA Journal. Dr. Thomas J. Greitz, Stockton University, retired, right, Tom, and he's also senior editor for the NACADA Journal because we won't let him retire. We have Dr. Shannon Hayes Buenaflor, Assistant Director of Transfer Student Advising and Admissions at the University of Maryland, is one of our panelists, and also Dr. Aaron Brown, Assistant Vice Provost for Academic Advising at the University of Texas at Arlington. Our topics today include a little bit about the NACADA Journal. We want to talk a little bit more about how we support scholarship within the journal. And then what we want to do is have some comments from those most directly involved with the process, including the editors, Dr. Rubin, the reviewers, Dr. Brown, and the authors, Dr. Buenaflor and actually Dr. Tom Greitz as well. We will end with our senior editor, Dr. Thomas Greitz, who will talk a little bit about what the future holds for the NACADA Journal, particularly in terms of direction. Let's start with our vision. Ultimately, our goal is to build a robust literature base about academic advising and its relationship to student learning success. The journal focuses on peer-reviewed, empirical, theoretical, and philosophical works. We really want to secure the place of the journal in promoting academic advising and its integral part in student learning success. That brings us to our mission. Our mission is really our purpose. Simply, our mission, our purpose, is to advance the field of academic advising, again, through the publication of peer-reviewed research and scholarship that contributes to our understanding about how academic advising supports student learning success. So the big question is, how do we do this? What I'd like to do now is turn it over to Dr. Lisa Rubin to talk about our structure, our process, as well as our intentions for the journal and our intentions to support submissions and contributions from the field. Lisa?
Thank you, Susan. I'm really excited to be on the panel with such great scholars here today. We are really about developing authors. We know that some of the best scholarship comes from folks who are working as academic advisors or administrators and may not write all the time or have the time to spend digging into literature. And we want to give everybody a voice to contribute to our field. And so that is simply providing infrastructure, as you see in the left part of our slide. We provide a lot of support. So for example, yesterday from the recording, the day before today here, the NACADA Research Committee offered its first ever Research Cafe Q&A session. And all of the journal editors for the 4 academic advising publications represented and answered questions about how to get scholars and writers interested and involved in the publication process. So not just the journal, but any of the publications, you can always contact the editors and ask, is this going in the right direction, or would my work be a good fit for the journal? And we are here to answer those questions. So if you say, here's an abstract of what I'm working on, is this something I could pursue? We'll give you some feedback and help you with the direction, or tell you where it might be a good fit if it's not going to fit in the journal. There's also great writer support through NACADA. We offer 4 different writing groups that you can join to get support from colleagues and from more writing aficionados that volunteer their time to help. And that is organized through the NACADA Center for Research under Wendy Troxel. And we also provide sample articles and presentations to guide you. So in the 2021 conference, we're offering scholarly paper sessions for the first time. And last year we did a preview in 2020 where some of those were offered live and then recorded to go back and refer to. And all of us here believe it's really good practice to submit conference proposals, to get experience presenting research, engage in feedback and dialogue with the audience, and then take that information and try to craft that proposal into a publishable manuscript. So these are all things that you can experience through attending different NACADA sessions and also reaching out for advice and support from all of the opportunities through the Center for Research and from both the journal and the NACADA review, at least through NACADA. So in that middle section here, developing authors, we often will talk to people at the conference or via email to see, again, that quick question, is this a good fit here, or should I run with this? Would this be publishable in a NACADA journal or review? And if so, we'll help the author say, hey, focus on this area and maybe submit back when you've added that or expanded upon the advising angle. And if not, we also refer folks to those resources I just mentioned. A lot of the time, people have great content and information, and it's just a way of crafting it in the written way so it's readable and interesting to somebody who's going to read our publications. And then our publication process is also very developmental. So when authors submit to us, we first do a desk review. And in the desk review, we look for if it's, again, good fit, if it has advising components, and then take it to a couple different directions, either letting the authors know it's not a good fit, but giving some suggestions on which journals it might go to, or we send it out to reviewers. And no matter what we do, whether it's a rejection or a revision, we always provide feedback. So even if you are told, I'm sorry, this is not a good fit right now, we might still tell you some things to improve in the writing, some things to add in the content, and also some journals to send it to. So it should be a positive experience and a developmental one. And then the reviewers also provide supportive feedback because, as you might imagine, all of us are volunteers and all of us do this to advance the scholarship of academic advising. So anytime you receive feedback, it hurts sometimes. It's hard not to take it personally. But if you take that step back and you think somebody spent a lot of time to read my work and provide feedback solely to help me improve, as a volunteer, that should make it worth your time to read what they provide that feedback in and then make those edits. And then we have 2 review rounds in the NACADA journal. Typically an author will submit, and if it is going through the process and they receive a revise and resubmit decision, then that author can resubmit it back for another revision opportunity or an acceptance if it doesn't get rejected. So we don't anticipate authors going through 52 revisions of something. We want to make the process efficient as well, so authors can get their work published in a timely manner. So sometimes that could be under a year or just over a year, depending on how many articles we have in the hopper, so to speak. So that's something we also aim to do, is that quick turnaround and making sure that if something doesn't work out, you still have the ability to submit timely work somewhere else. And then to the publication side, once you get accepted, which is very exciting, then we do reference checks to make sure all the references cited are accurate and both in the text and in the reference list. And then we have a copy editing process. A copy editing team goes through and not only just, fixes minor grammar issues, but also maybe helps reword some things to make things more clear. And then that goes back to the author And then there's a final proofing, which comes in the very nice formatting of the journal. So you can see what it will look like in print and make sure everything fits and all of your tables and figures fit and look nice and they're in the right place. And then we publish the issues twice a year. And those are both online open access and submitted or printed and mailed to you. So there's a lot of really exciting opportunities if you publish work, and we definitely encourage everybody to consider publishing with the NACADA Journal, but know that there's lots of other amazing outlets, including the NACADA Review, Academic Advising Today, and other avenues outside of NACADA. So now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Brown, and he's going to talk about the experience and insights from the reviewer perspective.
Thank you, Dr. Rubin. I've been an active member of NACADA since 2012, and I volunteer as a manuscript reviewer for the NACADA Journal. And so I'm just going to be offering a few comments from that lens of a manuscript reviewer. So when I receive a manuscript from the editors, I have up to 4 weeks to review before providing feedback. And my first approach, which is really common among the reviewers, is to initially read through the entire manuscript first without commenting, and then I go back for a second read, this time typing questions, notes, and suggestions for the author. And this really gives the reviewers a chance to get the full perspective of the entire article before making comments. Also, I think it's worth noting that the manuscript reviewers, we've gone through the publication process. And so we know how much time and effort is put into submitting the manuscript, as Dr. Rubin kind of alluded to earlier. I know I have appreciated thoughtful feedback on how to improve, and thus my comments and suggestions to the author are specific and they use a developmental approach. As reviewers, we're trained to look at the manuscript from the lens of praxis, meaning we ask the following questions. Would this new knowledge be useful to a practitioner? And that's referring to practice. What are the general principles and what are the connected theories and models used? And that's in reference to framing. And then how do they come together in ways that really shape and mold and have that relevance to the field of academic advising? So all three of those, practice, framing, and relevance, are really important and is a lens that we use when we review. And so a little bit of more detail about that. Starting from practice, we look for a clear and concise presentation of the case or the issue that's being presented. We look for the context, and we look to see how this new knowledge would actually benefit the day-to-day academic advisor or advising leadership. Now, in terms of framing and theory, is the work theoretically grounded in the literature, and does it have a stated and obvious purpose? It's really important. And then the data and the general principles, they need to be logically connected. And then the limitations of the theory or model have to be presented. So we're looking for that. Is there a theory? Is there a model that's specifically presented in the manuscript? And then the relevance for the profession. External validity is really important. And what I mean by that is the manuscript's results and recommendations go beyond just one small context or institution. It's really helpful if it's clear why this work is important to the field of academic advising, and the author describes how it will benefit the profession, and we don't have to guess or make assumptions there. And I'll finish with a few tips, 3 of them. Before you consider writing an article and submitting, I recommend that you read several NACADA Journal articles just to get a sense of what has been recently published and how authors have formatted their manuscripts, and make note of the qualitative and the quantitative data that appears. And if you're new to writing research articles, I would highly recommend spending that extra time consulting the literature on how to actually write effective methodology, results, and discussion sections. And then last, the strength of the findings and discussion sections have to be clear, concise, and we want them to offer implications for practice and for future research. And with that, I'll turn it over next to Dr. Shannon Hayes Buenaflor, who will talk about the experience of authors.
Thank you so much. So I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about the article that I submitted for publication and my experience working with the NACADA Journal. The paper that I submitted with my colleagues was part of a larger research project that we had been working on that focused on transfer student capital. Our work was a qualitative case study examining the ways in which students develop transfer student capital through the transfer process. Prior work on this from Lannon and his associates had focused on what transfer student capital is, and through our work, we wanted to better understand how students develop transfer student capital and what factors are most influential in providing students capital through the transfer process. At the time of publication, Dr. Luxo and Lindemann and I were graduate students, and so this was our first independent research project. And the article that we submitted to the NACADA Journal was actually the second manuscript that we produced based on the findings from our work. And to be honest, I think that the fact that this was our second piece is part of what made this particular process a bit more challenging for us. But in reflecting on our findings, it was incredibly clear to us that academic advisors were critical in supporting transfer students. And so we were really excited for the opportunity to work with NACADA, given their focus on advising for students. So our team submitted the first draft of our manuscript to the NACADA Journal in fall 2018. In the initial review, we were given substantial feedback and asked to enhance our literature review. We were also asked to work on the overall flow and purpose of our paper in order to tighten some of our ideas and to expand as appropriate in other areas. The feedback from the reviewers was incredibly detailed and truly helped us to think through our overall purpose in writing this paper. While the revisions did take a significant amount of work, our team was really grateful that the reviewers had been so detailed, and we really did learn a lot through the process. After making the initial revisions, we were asked to go through 2 additional reviews. So our second review was actually the most useful because it helped us think through our research questions a little bit more critically. When we submitted our initial manuscript, we had included both of the research questions that drove our overall project. But in working with the reviewers, we came to realize that this particular manuscript was truly only guided by one of our 2 research questions. And so we ultimately removed the second research question in order to further focus our ideas. Throughout each of the reviews that we went through with NACADA Journal, the reviewers that we were working with were incredibly supportive. The second letter that we received from the editor opened by sharing that the reviewers were very pleased with the revisions, and it went on to share that the manuscript is very close to being ready for acceptance. Having submitted manuscripts to other journals, I have to say that this positive reinforcement is not something that I was familiar with. I genuinely felt as though the reviewers and the editors were happy to read our work and that they wanted to guide us to a stronger version of our paper. And in the end, the manuscript that we submitted for publication was so much stronger than the initial draft that we had submitted in fall 2018. And the overall process, was very encouraging. We did not reach a point where we felt like we should give up. We really were learning kind of along that entire process. And so on the next slide, I just have a few recommendations. So for folks who are interested in submitting to the NACADA Journal for the first time, I would highly encourage you to do so. I had a very positive experience, and even despite the fact that we went through multiple revisions, I believe that the review process helped me to be more intentional when working with journals. It's really important to be mindful of the journal's audience. My background is in higher education, and prior to this experience, I had focused on journals that looked at transfer-oriented research, things like the Community College Review, Community College Journal of Research and Practice, and others. And so when submitting to the NACADA Journal, it's really important to be mindful of the literature and the key theories that guide the field of advising. This was a lesson that I've carried with me over the years, and it's really helped me when thinking about the overall audience and purpose of my work when working with other journals. So thank you for the opportunity to share. With that, I will go ahead and turn it over to our next speaker.
Thank you, Shannon. And everybody that has already contributed. I guess as a member of the original editorial board and having been a reviewer for the entire existence of the NACADA Journal, that I can validate everything that's been done and hopefully point out some things that I think we can aspire to in the future. Excuse me. As you can see on the slides, we're in our 5th decade. We're starting our 5th decade of publishing the NACADA Journal. So that's I think a very historical point that's worth mentioning. During that time, I've counted at least 22 editors, co-editors, guest editors, and we have 2 new editors, co-editors now, one coming on in October at the National Conference. We've had 6 special issues, 6 different cover styles, each new editorial team, meaning the editors, co-editors, not the entire review board, but do have some latitude in designing what they might like to see the format of the journal be. A big point, I think, in the recent history has been the acceptance of both qualitative and quantitative research. Focus on research, but initially the journal included many book reviews, which have been eliminated from pretty much from the journal now. But there were a lot of like conference presentations, because that's where people got their ideas, were how-to kinds of things. But now there's more of a focus on both qualitative and quantitative research. There was a period of time when one of the editors decided that only quantitative research mattered. So his preference was only to accept quantitative research articles. You can read all about this in a forthcoming review double article, series of articles by Marcia Miller, which will be coming out in the next several months. At one point, initially, we accepted any format, any acceptable format, whether it was APA, MLA, Chicago, Turabian, whatever kind of style that people were familiar with writing with. And that was okay, because we needed manuscripts. We needed to get a foundation. And once that happened, we ultimately decided that the APA format, was the probably the easiest to use, the easiest to print. And, so now that we're using that exclusively, which was a good move, I believe. Of course, that's what I used all the time. So that was my preference. All through all the things that Aaron mentioned, we have always maintained the integration of theory, research, and practice. You rarely will now find, certainly in the practice part, a how-to kind of article, unless it's extremely different, unusual, has such an impact that it's worthy of publishing. So it's not that we won't publish those things, but there's got to be, as Aaron suggested, there has to be some theory and research that backs up why that practice is even happening. And I think we have demonstrated some, some, as I call it, increased scrutiny, that is tightening up our own editorial perspectives, requirements, demands, whatever, to make every single article improve. And I think that's just part of the growth in that past 4-decade series of articles. We've had our trials and tribulations, but we've come through them and managed them and are ready to go ahead. So, to go ahead, there we go. Where I think we're headed. More diversity in content, that we will explore, as Shannon's and one of my passions, the transfer student, much more of subpopulations of students and how we're researching with those. And certainly with the recent pandemic and all of the issues that were created on campuses, both in the classroom and certainly in advising and every other area. We've learned a lot, and I think we need to share those through any of the publications that Lisa mentioned. But obviously, we've got a little bit stricter requirements for publishing in the journal. But we certainly want research articles to continue, and I think that will happen because of the support under the new Center for Research out of the Executive Office. Now I'm getting into a couple of my own personal maybe wishes rather than exactly where we're going. But I think we still need to demonstrate the value of academic advising. We all know about it. We all believe it. But I've often asked the question, you believe in this, but can you you prove, can you demonstrate that this really has an effect on student success, which is the next bullet point. How do we define student success versus institutional success? And I'll just give a quick aside. You know, in my opinion, institutional success is what's measured by accrediting agencies and college rating series and so forth, retention, graduation rates. For me, that's institutional success. We're more about individual student success. I think we need to separate those a little bit, and we get overwhelmed by the retention stats and the graduation stats and so forth. But I think, you know, we need to look more closely. And some of the things I'm reading, some of the research that I've been seeing, they're starting to move in that direction. The accrediting agency or a group of accrediting agencies has come out with a paper in which they're starting to look at things for accreditation that are not the most obvious and easy to find data points that will enhance the student success item. But I think each time we need to look at that. Is this institutional success or student success? Again, that's my own personal opinion. Something else that I've thought about recently is perhaps having special issues that join with other associations. In the last, well, including our chapter, Lisa and Susan, in the forthcoming book on scholarly writing, scholarly publication, but including that one out of an NACADA source. I've published in an ACRO publication, an ACPA publication, and an NISTS publication in the last 4, 5, 6 months at the most. And we have those commonalities, you know, in terms of what we do and what we're trying to achieve. And I would like to see us, we've talked about joint memberships and so forth with associations over the years, and it's never really taken hold, in my opinion, as strong as it could be. So maybe it's the publication process that will generate some of that. So that's kind of my wish list for where I think we can go, will go, and, you know, let's all pitch in and do our best parts. And now I think I turn it back to Susan.
Great. I really want to thank Dr. Brown, Dr. Buenaflor, Dr. Greitz, and Dr. Rubin for their comments today. I have to say that although I only had a few comments to make at the very beginning, I found this to be one of our best presentations. Can I tell you that? And I hope that we do put it on our website. I hope that what folks take away from this is that the NACADA Journal in our processes and our intentions is really about opening up opportunities for our members and others to publish about the critical role or the role, or as Tom has indicated, demonstrate the role that academic advising plays in student learning success. Our focus is on quality, as the scenario or the history of the journal demonstrates. We continue to try to secure our place within the leading journals for higher education. And I think we're making great strides in that regard. Ultimately, I hope that you view us all as not just critics in terms of the review process, but to quote Dr. Wendy Troxel, critical friends. We're critical friends, and we are really, through our comments, through our reviews, and through our process, we want to try to bring the best out in your own manuscripts. And in so doing, we are advancing academic advising. I'll leave you with also a thanks to Ashley Thomas, who is our managing editor. And I will leave you now with a set of resources that we think that you might find useful as you begin to look at some of your own writing and consider contributing to the journal. So have a great day. Colleagues, any other comments?
Thank you for attending, everybody.